Now in this video I'm going to talk about what time you should break your fast in Ramadan. Many Muslims, as you know, break their fast at sunset, also known as Maghrib. But let's see what the Quran says about that. In verse 187 of chapter 2, we have the verse that tells you what time to break your fast. I've highlighted it in yellow. The verse reads, "And eat and drink until the white thread of dawn appears to you distinct from its black thread. Then complete the fast till the night." Now the key word here is the last word, the night, which in Arabic is il-layl. Now that's a pretty basic word. Any native Arabic speaker would tell you that if you take the word layl, it means night in English. So just from this verse alone, we would see that the time to break your fast is at night. And most people would describe nighttime to be when it's dark outside. Obviously, when sunset begins, or the Maghrib time prayer begins, it's not dark yet outside. It's actually still very bright. But as most people know, especially in Islamic countries, as soon as they hear the Maghrib adhan, they start eating. They break their fast. So so this verse alone, and just the very last word where it says il-layl, or the night, should make you think that the time to break your fast is after sunset, when it's dark outside, when nighttime begins. Now some people will say that nighttime begins when sunset begins, but I think most people would agree that that doesn't make any sense. So let's look deeper into this and see what information we can get from the Quran to help us understand what nighttime is and what sunset is and when nighttime begins. So first of all, let's see what sunset is, or what terms the Quran uses to describe sunset. There's a verse 86 of chapter 18. It reads, "Until when he reached the setting of the sun." Okay, the last two words there in Arabic is Maghrib al-Shams. And again, these are very basic words actually. Maghrib means the place of the setting, or sunset, and al-Shams is the sun. And so here we see that the Quran uses the term Maghrib al-Shams to mean sunset. Now there's another term used in the Quran to describe sunset, and that is ghurub. And we can find that used in verse 130 of chapter 20, also in verse 39 of chapter 50. It reads, "So be patient over what they say, and exalt with praise your Lord before the rising of the sun and before its setting." And so the last part of that verse I've highlighted in yellow. You can see where it says وَقَبْلَ غُرُوبِهَا, so and before its setting, or the setting of the sun. Clearly this is talking about the setting of the sun, because the previous word was shams again, and so it is clearly using the word ghurub to describe the setting of the sun, and that is the opposite of the word tulu, which means rising. So yeah, ghurub is another term used in the Quran to describe the setting of the sun. Now let's see what some dictionaries say about these two terms. On the left, we have the Dictionary of the Holy Quran by Omar A.M. I've highlighted or encircled in red the words, the key words there. Ghurub is translated as sunset, unsurprisingly. And the word Maghrib is translated as the setting of the sun, which is exactly what we saw in the previous two example verses. Now there's another dictionary, the Edward Lane's Lexicon. There we find the word Maghrib is translated as sunset. So these two dictionaries are in accordance with what we've seen in the previous two sample verses for the setting of the sun or sunset. So it should be clear by now that when the Quran wants to describe sunset, it uses one of these two terms, either Ghurub or Maghrib al-Shams. It does not use a layl or layl. So what is layl then? There's a verse, verse 29 of chapter 79, and it gives us a good description of what night is. It reads, "And he darkened its night and extracted its brightness." I've highlighted the word layl in yellow. And so we see here that night has to do with darkness, okay, which most people would agree with. When it's dark outside, it's nighttime. But furthermore, the verse also says that night is when the brightness of day has been extracted. Well, when it's sunset, it's still pretty bright outside. So the brightness of day has not yet been extracted. It's beginning to be extracted, but it hasn't completely extracted yet. And so, yeah, it's definitely not dark at sunset. And here, this verse seems to indicate that nighttime is when it's dark, as you'd expect. There are other verses in the Quran that use the word layl. There's verse 86 of chapter 18, 67 of chapter 10, and so on. You can look those up yourself, but I think this verse does a pretty good job at explaining what nighttime is, or a layl. So when exactly does layl begin, or nighttime begin? Because as you know, I mean, nighttime spans a very long period of time, and what we're interested in is when exactly does nighttime begin? Or when is it first dark outside? Scientists have come up with various terms to describe the different phases of twilight. That is, twilight in the afternoon or evening, dusk, and twilight in the morning or dawn. Looking at the dawn period of the day, when it's nighttime, the sun is, of course, below the horizon, but it slowly moves up towards the horizon. And when the center of the sun is at 18 degrees below the horizon, that is the beginning of what's called astronomical twilight or astronomical dawn. And that phase continues until the center of the sun reaches 12 degrees below the horizon. And at that point, you've entered into the nautical twilight phase. And when the center of the sun reaches 6 degrees below the horizon, that is civil twilight. And when the center of the sun reaches or is at the horizon, then that is the beginning of sunrise. Similarly, we have the same thing for sunset. And so, of course, if you live in a city and, you're surrounded by buildings, it's hard to see the horizon. But if you were out at sea, like on a boat, and, then you'd have just the open sea in front of you, and you can clearly see the horizon. And that's probably why nautical twilight is one of the phases there, because anyway, that's one of the terms. So in San Francisco on June 5th of 2017, I took this screenshot from timeanddate.com. It shows you the different time periods throughout the day. And so from here we can try to determine what time nighttime begins. Now, fortunately, on many weather apps that you can download to your phone, like the Google weather app, the Yahoo weather app, and here's a screenshot of the Weather Underground weather app. What it shows you is when sunset is, or when it begins, and when last light is. And, as we understand nighttime to be, is when the light of day has been extracted and you're left with darkness. And so it would make sense then that last light is first dark, or the beginning of nighttime. And so here we see that sunset, or Maghrib, is at 8:28 p.m. in this example, but last light, or first dark, or Layl, nighttime, the beginning of night, is at 8:59. So it's about 30 minutes after sunset, the beginning of sunset. So this time, 8:59 p.m., for this example of San Francisco on June 5th, 2017, the time to break your fast would have been at 8:59 p.m. And so let's go back to the previous slide and see what time that corresponds to, or what phase of twilight that corresponds to. And we can see pretty clearly here that 8:59 is the beginning of nautical twilight, or nautical dusk. And that is about half an hour after civil twilight, which is at 8:28 p.m., which we saw from the other slide, is the beginning of sunset. And so to conclude, the time to break your fast is at nautical dusk, or nautical twilight, or you can just say last light. And that varies throughout the world, but it is most definitely sometime after the beginning of sunset, and so, or Maghrib. And so I think it should be pretty clear now that most people who break their fast at Maghrib are breaking their fast a little too soon, which could possibly invalidate their fasts. And you can decide to do whatever you want, but the proofs that I presented here should be pretty clear. The time to break your fast is after Maghrib, and it's actually at night, not at the beginning of sunset. And you can just download one of those weather apps and just look at when last light is. So thanks for watching this video. If you like to get more, please subscribe. Thanks.